Welcome back. Welcome to video 3. In this video, we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty, the brass tacks. What kinds of activities should or could we do besides sight singing and dictation to get students to where we want them to be? How can we get away from the central focus on notation? How much notation should we allow or require? Is there a right amount?
Well, I'll kick us off here. In lots of our discussions, we were talking about the component skills for those two big activities of sight singing and dictation. And that perhaps we fall into this trap of assuming that students have all of those component skills if they can do that end goal product of notating a melody or sight singing a melody. So some of those component skills might just be identifying the mode, major or minor, identifying the meter, thinking about their eye movements during sight reading, thinking about starting pitch, those sorts of things, scale degrees. So we could certainly change activities to just highlight those individual component skills to start to allow students opportunities to practice them and then eventually find ways to assess them rather than just having this final product that doesn't necessarily reveal their skills. In our article, we mentioned Karpinski's proposal to give limited information during dictation tasks. So for instance, just providing the clef, a letter name of a key, but no mode, the bottom number of a time signature, and not providing any aural cues. So those component skills of recognizing mode and meter and starting pitch might be the exact things we're trying to help our students acquire in terms of skills, but we don't create opportunities for them to learn if we provide all of that information for them ahead of time. So I don't know if, Tim, you want to kind of pick up on this idea of component skills a little more.
Sure, yeah, and I want to stick with Karpinski for a minute here because he's got if you've read Aural Skills Acquisition, his book about how to teach aural skills, which I think is still relevant today. The chapter on melodic dictation, which is one of his big discussions, starts with this lovely discussion of a student dictation where it looks, I can't even remember, it looks like they got everything right except the last note, but it turns out, so Gary did an interview with this student and found out that 2 mistakes canceled each other out. They were writing in the wrong clef, but also heard it wrong. And therefore, actually, the last note is the only one that they heard right. So when we do these composite skills, it's like a black box. The students did something. We see it. They put out this end result, but we don't know why did it end up the way it ended up. Mm-hmm. And I think that example has really stuck with me because it's really instructive about what if we did focus on each of those skills in and of themselves? Then we actually know what students are working on. And that's not a reason not to do sight singing and dictation, but it might be a reason not to do it right from the beginning or to do it alongside these other skills or to assess it in ways that focus students on these component skills. And so I think that's just a really important way to think about how to build those skills and how to make them accessible for more students. Because as much as when we lump them all together, all these skills together, it's hard for students to improve on specific ones. Lee Van Handel had a really important point about this a few years ago at an SMT presentation as well, where she pointed out that that's really taxing on students' working memory. Mm-hmm. And so students who have automated a bunch of these processes, like they can instantly hear the key, they can instantly hear the meter, they're not going to have too much trouble because they can focus on the parts of the process that they need to. But people for whom all of those parts are things that need to occupy space in what they're thinking about right now, have a really hard time with that task and with actually working on those skills. So yeah, I think thinking about component skills and highlighting them is really helpful, especially at early levels of aural skills.
Okay. I was just going to follow up with singing a little bit. That you read in a lot of the textbooks that sight singing is viewed as kind of a window into students' internal hearing ability. But if we don't account for pitch matching abilities or vocal production issues, along with all of the complicated things that you're processing to just sing a melody in the moment, then that outcome of what they sing might not reflect their skills in any way. We need to incorporate the singing ability into the internal hearing as well.
Which is another skill to be folded into the composite, right? I mean, listening to both of you talk, it strikes me that all these these canonical dictation exercises are in fact composite skills. And it's not, I don't think any of us are saying to do away with them altogether. But there's something to be said for delaying them or at least recognizing them as composite skills that require a student to do 2 or 3 or 10 different things simultaneously. And any one of those variables can upset the entire apple cart. It also strikes me, though, and I'm interested in your guys' response to this, that if we were to reimagine a curriculum, and say we're stuck with that 4-semester frame that we have right now that we've already discussed, if we were to reimagine a curriculum that didn't start from these composite skills like melodic dictation, for instance, since we're talking about that, and dialed it back to working on just recognizing scale degrees in a diatonic field, right? Doing some call and response with that and getting comfortable with that, and then rhythmic work, and then small melodic chunks, and building up to melodic dictation. I'm married to an elementary music teacher who is trained in the ORF method, and I have a dream that I will someday implement of building an oral skills curriculum using ORF methods, which involve a lot of just, in my mind, involving weeks and weeks and weeks of students getting practice, just finding their way in basic diatonic space with graduated call and response, vocal improv using movable do solfege, gradually translating that into singing note names and given keys, and gradually translating that with rhythmic work into taking down things that we've been singing back and forth in the classroom. Great, now go write it down in 3/4 time or whatever. And I'm imagining a curriculum that might work that way at the front end, so that we have an entire school of music full of students who are embarrassingly proficient with basic diatonic solfege. Movable do solfege is what I would promote. Not that it's the only way to do this. But to build a curriculum like that front loads so much of that kind of basic proficiency in diatonic materials, which I think have application to so many musics, means that maybe I'm not getting to singing tone rows in my 4th semester. Maybe we're not talking about hearing the difference between an 014 and an 015 in my 4th semester. And I think I'm going to be okay with that. But I'm wondering about how you guys feel about that issue of front loading with more elementary skills and activities.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I've got a bunch of thoughts on this. I'll try to keep it to a reasonable length. One is that I don't think we have to give up the composite skills. I think putting skills in a context is important because, among other things, we want our students to be able to do all of those things that they do outside of the classroom, whether it's error detection when they're leading their ensemble, or whether it's shaping a phrase in their lessons, or whatever it is. And if we're not asking them to put it in a context in the classroom, they might not sort of feel that invitation to bring it out into the world. But I think we can think more broadly about what those tasks are, and also about how we assess them. So like, what if, one thing that I've kind of got on my list to talk about for this question is ensemble skills. And I've talked in another video about how so much of what musicians do is collaborative, and yet so much of what we do in oral skills classes tends to be individual. What if we have people do things in an ensemble? You send people to a room and they're each assigned a page of the score to lead everyone through it. Everyone else is practicing sight reading, and they are practicing error detection, correction, conducting, all of this stuff. That's really complicated. But it's also a forgiving environment, because that's really too complex for us to have a standard of perfection. We're not going to grade those students who are sight reading on a standard of perfection. We're not going to grade that person who's doing the error detection on a standard of perfection. And so it gives them an opportunity to try out bringing those skills into a richer context. Now, I think part of the reason we haven't done that is that challenge of how do you assess it, and our feeling like we have to have scientific methods of assessment. So really our conversation keeps centering back to that piece, and I think that's going to be an important video for us to make. But I think it's important for us to put these things in context. But at the same time, there's an ideological choice here. I think that to the extent that we want all of our students to be able to succeed, we need to be able to teach in a way where those who don't come in with some of these skills automated are able to succeed in our curricula. Other people may disagree with that position and say, no, our institution is about teaching the best of the best. And if people aren't ready to do that, it's really holding everybody else back for us to focus on that. And I think that there is some room for different ideologies and different kinds of institutions making those choices.
Yeah. I was thinking also, as you talked about putting skills in context, that as we broaden our activities, or perhaps have more diversity of activities, we could think about incorporating more emphasis on things than just pitch and rhythm, which is really a strong emphasis in the current oral skills curriculum. So whether they're listening for phrases and cadences, or motivic comparisons, or timbre and texture and dynamics and ensemble balance. And Tim talked about ensemble coordination. I think there are important ways that we need to incorporate those in context, listening and performing skills, rather than a sole focus on pitch and rhythm and harmony, which tends to be the case now.
That's a thing, especially in the 21st century school of music, right? I'm thinking one of the things I learned as I was working on our review together is that there's a lot of software which I didn't talk about. We didn't talk about in the review in JMTP, but there's a lot of software out there that's starting to work on training aural skills in timbral stuff. Mm-hmm. Recording engineering aural skills is something that I'm not even trained to talk about, much less teach somebody about. But that's a whole new corner of the store that's opening up in lots of schools of music, maybe coming soon to a theater near me, that I and we corporately as a discipline need to be prepared to train students to do that kind of work in a recording booth. The sort of thing that I'm not prepared to do myself yet. It's a brave new world we're in, and that's a healthy thing, but it's a little bit scary for us old folk.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I was actually thinking that even just finding different recordings, to go back to something Stacey said on YouTube, find a mediocre choral performance of something and ask students to criticize it, or you can put it in a more neutral way if you wish, but or some different performances of songs, like when where a singer is noticeably flat, and ask students to comment on that. So I'm going to suggest that we write in the double bar for this video. And our next video will discuss assessment.